Donald's view on the week in sports, including interviews with interesting personalities, John's opinions on topics that you may have missed, and entertainment through analysis of the sports we love. Now, from the Dream Big Studios, here's John O'Donnell.
And welcome back to Cinderblock Sports. I am your host, John O'Donnell. Please follow us on Twitter at Cindersports and Facebook Cinderblock Sports. Shoot us an email at cinderblocksports@gmail.com. Okay, the theme for this last segment is going to be nuts. Everybody went nuts over Kyler Murray's combine measurements. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are nuts in the way they deal with the media. And we've got to talk about some female athletes who still have their nuts despite competing in women's sports. Let's start there, shall we? Transgender athletes. Never thought this was actually going to be a topic, but that's how sports works, right? Life bleeds into it a little bit. From the Jerry Richardson impact of the Me Too movement, a very good and proper thing, as Jerry Richardson apparently had a culture of sexual and racial harassment, and it cost him his team, and it should have, to the Mark Cuban incident with the Mavericks and their executive who had lots of issues relating to his employees, and Mark Cuban took corrective action and kept his team and put his team on the right path. So life bleeds into sports. We get that. And transgender issues are important. They are very important. If somebody does not identify themselves as a member of their genetic, biological gender, then we now have the technology and the medication and the counseling to help that person identify as the opposite gender. Not going to get into a debate here about Bruce Jenner versus Caitlyn Jenner. That's not why we're here. But let's talk about the issue. The issue, when it comes down to sports, is whether natural-born female athletes or cisgender athletes should be competing against transgender athletes. Let's be clear, these are men. These are boys, if you want to put it in that context, where high school athletes are still boys involved here. And they're in various stages of transitioning, as they call it, to being female. Should those athletes, the transgender athletes, be competing against the cisgender, biological female athletes? The answer seems obvious to me. No. I'm a guy. I know that as a guy I have but natural advantages over a female athlete. I'm bigger, I'm stronger, and I'm faster. And that's playing out. This came out clearly in Connecticut track and field. In multiple events, 2 transgender women won multiple events against cisgender females. And parents in Connecticut threw up their arms in protest. And look, I think they have a point here. Let's go over the playing field. There's 50 states. Only 24 of them actually have policies related to this transgender athlete issue. Connecticut is one of 17 states, and I'm surprised the number's that high, that only require you to identify as a gender in order to participate in those sports. So if you say, I'm a female, you may participate in female sports. That seems like a slippery slope. Both of the athletes at issue here, and I'm not going to use their names, because while they're not minors, maybe, I'm not sure the age of majority, they're older than 16, less than 18. I don't think it's fair to be calling people out by name here. This is a bigger issue than that, okay? This is one where I don't think we need to identify or point fingers at any one person. But just because Jimmy, air quotes, decides that he wants to be Julie and feels like a Julie doesn't mean he should be running against Susies and Carries and Marys. It just doesn't work that way to me. Now, in this track and field event, the times that these transgender females put up were much, much lower. In other words, they ran much faster than the cisgender female athletes. We're not surprised here. Now, they weren't record-breaking, okay, but they were close. And I just think it puts too much of a competitive advantage in favor of these transgender athletes. And the effects of this are really, really, really important. Let's not just say these are sore losers, right? These cisgender females aren't just sour grapes. This was a regional track meet. You win this track meet. It may have been a state track meet, but let's just say it was a state track meet. You win this, you go to nationals. That's where colleges look at you. This is where you get a chance to pay for your schooling. You don't think the parents of those children deserve a fair chance at that? The children themselves deserve a fair chance at that? They do. So these transgender athletes who have this competitive advantage just because they identify themselves as a Julie, that's not fair. Now, 7 other states do have a policy that's a little stricter. You have to compete in the gender that your birth certificate says you are. If you have a twig and berries, you are a male athlete. That's how it works. Now, there can be exceptions made, but they have benchmarks related to testosterone, which is really the hormone we're most interested in here. But testosterone and other chemical balances that can qualify you in opposition to your birth certificate gender. I think that's a fair policy. I don't know that it's the right policy. I give it some more thought, and I think to myself, these athletes do deserve a chance to identify as the gender they choose and enjoy benefits related to that decision. In other words, when I say benefits, I don't mean unfair advantages. I mean, if you're a high school kid and you want to play track, you should be allowed to play track, right? Well, maybe, but choices have consequences. If you're going to identify yourself as a female, maybe you have to hit certain benchmarks before you can be an athlete. One of the athletes involved here, I think, kind of took the wrong tact. You know, she said something to the effect of, well, other athletes have unfair advantages all the time. Maybe their parents send them to running camps. Maybe they have longer legs. I get where you're trying to go here, transgender athlete. I do. But there's a difference between having a better coach and having longer legs and just having a different physiology to your body. That is different. And maybe because you're 17, you may not fully understand that. I don't think either of these athletes are trying to game the system. I don't go into the camp of Martina Navratilova, a Hall of Fame tennis player and staunch supporter of gay and lesbian rights. Martina was identified as a lesbian long before that was socially acceptable. She has fought that fight a real long time. But she said some things that probably are from Crazy Town. She said things to the effect of, well, a male athlete can choose to be a female athlete, take advantage of his strength and size, then stop being a female athlete, and as she put it, go back to making babies. That just goes too far. I don't think these athletes are doing it just for the competitive advantage. It gives them one, and we need to address it, but I don't think they're sitting there thinking, well, I need to become a female so that I can, take advantage of the system. And when somebody like Martina Navratilova says something stupid like that, it really gives people from the other side, the transgender supporters, ammunition to say, look, people are just scared of transgender athletes. They're not scared of transgender athletes. It's just as stupid to say they don't have a competitive advantage, because they do. So let's kind of come out of Crazy Town on both sides, right? Let's find the middle ground, and let's see what we can do. The U.S. Olympic Committee, who I don't know that we want to look at them as the bastion of intelligence and reason when it comes to anything, but they have a policy now where if you're going to compete as a transgender female, you have to meet certain benchmarks related to your biology, related to your transition, and I think that's probably the right answer. I think we owe it to our high school athletes to start getting some boundaries, if you will, some consistent guidelines around this topic so that we have some consistency in the high school sports. Because think about it, if states don't get consistent, you might have forum shopping here. And then what happens when we get to the college levels? As I mentioned, if you have transgender athletes competing in women's sports, you are probably denying cisgender female athletes the opportunity at certain scholarships, at certain records. That can matter a lot. So I think it's something to look at. I know it's in the news now. One thing, too, that I think we have to keep in mind, these are kids. I was very taken aback by some statistics that some states identify that up to 4% of their high school population identifies as transgender. The national average of adults is about 0.5 to 0.6%. And that makes sense, right? kids kind of get confused. They kind of travel a different path, and they might think one day, hey, I want to be a Julie, and then their hormones might change, and they might not want to be. So I think we have to keep that in mind, too, when making up these rules, and we're coming up with some policies, and it's a really important issue. So I come down on this. If you are born with the twig and berries, you're a guy. If you want to compete in female sports, let's have some benchmarks. Let's have some rules, and let's make this a fair playing field for cisgender female athletes. Okay, let's revisit Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant and why those two knuckleheads can't seem to deal with the media correctly. And I want to get to my point real quick. My problem is that these guys kind of typify what is becoming a real issue with the sports personalities and the media, and that is they are attacking the reporter. And what's funny about this is if you liken this to Donald Trump and how he's treated the media, this is very similar. And I know most athletes, especially in the NBA, don't affiliate with Donald Trump. They don't like him. But yet, just like Donald Trump likes to point his fingers at certain reporters and say, no, you ask bad questions, you're fake news, this is what Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant and other players are doing. And it's not right. It's not fair. Kyrie Irving, I'm looking right at you. This is the guy, right? This is the guy who, as the Celtics were struggling about 15, 20 games ago now, said, I called LeBron James, I apologize because I need to be a leader of men. How's that working out for you? I know how it's working out for you. The only reason you're not in sixth place is because the East sucks. So you're stuck in fifth place. Apparently you're going to make the playoffs, of course. But this team is loaded with talent. This team should have been in the finals last year. You probably should have beaten the Cavaliers and the Raptors. And that was without Kyrie Irving and without Gordon Hayward. Now, Gordon Hayward, I'm giving him a pass this year. But Kyrie Irving, you were one of the best players in the NBA. So when you say you're going to be a leader of men, and then you're seen talking to Kevin Durant in the hallway, in what might be an innocent conversation, or it could be you saying to Kevin Durant 2 max slots, which probably refers to either the Lakers or to the Knicks. When you're caught saying that, and caught, I don't mean in a negative term, you were observed saying it. So the media comes to you and asks you, and what do you say? You blame the reporter. You say, why are you asking me this question? Because you're a public figure, knucklehead. That's what he does. He investigatively reports. And he wasn't even being mean about it. The reporter was just asking, do you want to throw water on this? Do you want to explain? And poor Kyrie. It's stuff like this that doesn't make the league fun for him. Suck it up, Buttercup. You are a public figure. You are one of the top 10 players in the league. All you had to say was, Kevin is a real close friend of mine. We were having a private moment. There's nothing to report out of that conversation. I would like you to respect my privacy. Hey, look, I'm not even in the media. I'm not even a public figure, and I figured it out, Kyrie. Come on. Buy a globe. The earth is round, and you are bad at handling the media. And then just a week later, you lose again. And a reporter asks you, what is your confidence in this team? And you know what you should have said? You should have said this. We are continuing to find our path. I, as leader of this team, need to find a way to make us all better, to make myself better. Remember, Kyrie, you're a leader of men now. No, you're not. You're a petulant child. And so when that reporter asks you that question, what is your confidence in this team? You said, what do you mean? And he tried to repeat the question. Then you said, what kind of question is that? And the reporter had the gumption, had the nuts, if you will, to say, it's a legitimate question because it is. And you, Kyrie Irving, next question. Great answer. Great leadership. No. C, none of the above. And Kevin Durant, you're no better. You sit up there and you point fingers at the media and you say, I'm not dealing with you, local media. You're not fair to me. It's all about free agency, and you're asking me about these trades, and it's not fair. I just want to play basketball. Yeah? All right. Go to Rucker Park. Go to the YMCA. Go play basketball. Oh, wait. You'd kind of like that $25, $30 million paycheck too? Then get in front of the microphone, give legitimate answers, and shut the hell up. Don't attack the media. Don't say, you need to grow up. Yeah, you. Don't start pointing fingers. Mr.